Hi, thanks for tuning in and welcome to this short webinar that we're going to do on risk. My name's Steve Hayes, this is my colleague Michael Darby, and collectively we're just going to have a short discussion around risk assessment, risk analysis, and what that really means to you perhaps as a radio manufacturer or a manufacturer of some sort of electronic device. So let's start at the beginning. What really are we talking about in terms of risk? Because if you're a designer of something, then from a safety perspective, you're probably quite familiar with risk and risk assessment, the what if type scenarios that you go through as part of that R&D and to reality phasing through the product development life cycle. We have safety standards, so the international standard 62368, for example, is a risk-based safety standard now, so people are very familiar with that. But when we start thinking about risk as applied to radio products, manufacturers, test labs, notified bodies, we all still have slightly different views on what it actually means. So some industry groups that have started thinking about that and trying to put down on paper what that might actually be. Michael, do you want to just give us a quick overview as to what those sorts of things are?
Yeah, so I guess one of the first documents on the topic of risk and risk assessments for the Radio Equipment Directive was a technical guidance note, TGN. Number 30, TGN 30. It was written a long time ago actually by some Radio Equipment Directive Compliance Association members, notified body group, and then most recently we had another look at that document and said, well, it's been used now, it's been in use, is there anything we can do to improve it? And we realised that there were some things that needed to be updated, and that even though there was a guidance note, people still didn't understand. These guidance notes are written if people don't understand a topic. Once you've had multiple people say, I don't understand, then obviously guidance is needed. So if you've got a guidance document and people are saying, I still don't understand, it stands to reason, therefore, that you're going to have to update your guidance document. So we've been working on that. I've been taking responsibility for that document in the notified body community, and that recently got a positive vote and a publication with the Red CA. It's available for anybody really to look at, especially if you're a Red CA member, you can get it. But even if you're not a Red CA member, you could contact the secretary of the Red CA and maybe request to join the group, or even just request a copy. Maybe your notified body might help you with that. Alongside that though, ETSI has appreciated that it's an important topic, and specifically ADCO. ADCO stands for Administrative Cooperation, and it's the term for market surveillance authorities in Europe. Now, I don't want to try and use the threat of punishment as a big stick here, but market surveillance in Europe, they take these risk assessments very seriously and they look for the risk assessment. If there is no risk assessment by the manufacturer, that's considered a formal non-compliance. And so it's very important for market surveillance that the manufacturer gets it right. They've been very excited to see this development of TGN 30, and now we're all collectively working on an ETSI document. It won't be an EN document, it won't be a harmonised standard, it's going to be a TR, technical report. In fact, the author of this document works for ADCO Red, the Market Surveillance Authority for the Radio Equipment Directive. And both Steve and I sit on that committee group, and the TGN 30 that I've been taking care of is one of the main input documents to this ETSI document. So we're hoping that they won't contradict each other, in fact they'll enhance each other.
And actually, sorry to interrupt you there, but it's an interesting point that market surveillance are actually taking a leading role in this, certainly from a market surveillance point of view, but equally as a notified body, we often see a presentation of submission for a type examination to us as a notified body, and almost without failure, there's always a discussion about where is the risk analysis file. And it's probably the single most the the document that is least understood out of all of the submissions that we see. Either it's incomplete or there just isn't one at all. And those are the only ones that we see as a notified body. For all those manufacturers that don't need a notified body because perhaps they have a harmonised standard, you still need to do the risk analysis. You still need to document it. We're only seeing the ones that come through to us as a notified body, so it's a big issue, right?
Yeah, and every manufacturer must create one, even if you fully use harmonised standards. And because this isn't a requirement within the standards. Europe compliance is quite unique in the sense that you have the directive, for example, the Radio Equipment Directive. Not a technical document, by the way. You won't find terms like spurious emissions or dBm or megahertz in the red. It's a trade directive to allow products to be placed on the market in the EU and to have free movement of trade. The technical assessment, safety, EMC, radio and these other aspects, is just one of the articles within it. Article 3 of the red says you're going to have to assess your product from a technical point of view as part of this whole placing your product on the market thing. So there's nothing in the red which tells you what to do. ETSI standards and Senelec standards exist to tell you how to test for safety, EMC and radio. So it's quite tricky that there's not really a format or a forum for all this other sort of guidance. If we look over to the USA, you could say that the FCC create their rules, ANSI create test methods, but the FCC would also be able to incorporate instructions and ways forward and solutions, and this type of thing the FCC could just put into their rules or into one of their KDBs. In Europe we don't have that. Each different country has their own spectrum regulator, but the European Commission as a whole isn't a spectrum regulator, and CEPT isn't going to take care of it because it's not their role either. So how to create the risk assessment is really quite a complicated thing. And if I was a manufacturer, I think I would struggle too. A good friend of mine once said, art is never complete, it's only ever abandoned. And so at some point you've got to reach a point and go, I think I've done enough. And it's a little bit like that with the risk assessment. You need to have done enough to say, well, has it been useful to me? And this shouldn't be a punishment document. This shouldn't be, right, I've designed my product, I've done all the hard work, I've got to the end, now I've got to just quickly write a risk assessment to satisfy market surveillance or to satisfy the notified body. It's much more beneficial to think of it as an aid for the manufacturer to help the manufacturer understand their own product and understand what they're doing. And I think if a manufacturer uses their risk analysis correctly, they'll realise that it's quite a beneficial thing to do. For example, if you take in a cellular radio module or a wireless LAN radio module and you put it into your product, and then you think, well, I've tested it fully, or the manufacturer of the module has done most of the testing, I'm going to repeat all the radiated parts, I'm going to sell my product. And then when you're writing your risk assessment, you think to yourself, well, hang on a minute, my product is actually going to go on the outside of a vehicle, and I'm selling these to Finland, but also to Greece or Spain. The temperature extremes of my product are pretty severe. So suddenly now I've thought of something that is a compliance risk for my product, and that hasn't been covered, so I need to go back now. Or maybe you've got some product and you've considered it as a battery-powered device or a mains-powered device, and then suddenly you realise, well, actually with a common charger here, I've got USB connections. People could be plugging these into cigarette lighters in cars, so when did I do the vehicle transience test? Well, I haven't. So actually that's a trigger point. So even though I've fully applied harmonised standards, the risk analysis could be a good tool for the manufacturer to go, well, wait a minute, I think I missed something. Or document exactly why they did that thing. So yeah, it's a difficult document to say, yes, you finished, but it's, as Steve said, we see quite a range from 1 page to 100 pages.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So if you go to the Element website, you'll find that we've already created a couple of white papers, one on what is an EMC risk assessment, another one what is a radio risk assessment. So feel free to go to the resources area on there to download a copy for yourself to take a look at. But in addition to that, this is a topic that won't go away. And I think, Michael, you are going to do a webinar on that later in the year.
Yeah, so we're going to have a dedicated webinar of about 1 hour length. I think we're scheduling it for around September or October 2022. And that will really cover the whole topic of risk, not just for Europe, but for the FCC and Canada, the Europe and the UK. And also we have a one-day real life, real people seminar at one of our Element Radio labs up in Hull. We have that scheduled for the 13th of July 2022, and risk will be one of the topics on there.
Great. All right, lovely. Well, thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you either physically at the seminar, the one that Michael's just mentioned, or on one of our future webinars where we're talking about this. And Michael and I do a regular update of what's going on in the industry, so feel free to tune into that and we'll keep you updated the progress of the ETSI document that Michael was referring to, and any other of these related topics on risk itself. So thank you again, and see you next time.
Thank you.